Hi guys, I hope you're well. I've obviously been setting work through Show My Homework like all your other teachers, but for me, I really struggle doing that because obviously you're working independently, but I'm really missing teaching. So I'm trying something a little bit different. I'm not very good at technology, as you all know. I've taught you for long enough now. What I'm trying to do is set up a bit of a YouTube channel, stick on some kind of revision PowerPoints and talk you through them. So actually what you can do is you can pause it on certain slides, or pause it as you're making notes on what I've said, or pause it when we're watching a video together, and you can use it at your own pace rather than you just being on your own. But I wanted to say hello as well, because I haven't seen you, I haven't seen your books, I haven't seen your work. I've seen quite a bit of the work that's come through, but giving feedback on that is quite difficult, so I've tried to do that as much as possible, but I think this way, hopefully it might help you a little bit. So what I'm doing today is I'm just looking at a bit of an overview so far on how medicine developed throughout the Renaissance. I know you've already got a good grasp of who Vesalius is, who Harvey is, who Paré is, and who Hunter are, but this is just going over it. And for those of you that don't know, hopefully this will help a bit more as well and bring you along with us. The first point is about factors. You know on this paper there's a 16-mark question around factors. Okay, you know you're going to get that. And what I want you to do just to begin with is just to see, and I'm going to go and stand over the factors here, to see how many factors you can actually remember and factors that had an impact on medicine. So pause it, give yourself a minute, okay, a little bit of a challenge, bang, okay, if I was in the lesson I'd put the music on, try and list as many factors as you can, okay, go. Right, hopefully you come back and you have here, okay. Factors that have an impact on medicine through time are religion, and we know about how much control religion had, certainly after ancient times in the Middle Ages, over the development of medicine, because the church did not allow dissection, and it supported the ancient ideas of Galen and Hippocrates. So this is hindering the development and stopping it from progressing. War, which we touched on a little bit with Paré, the French army surgeon, who was able to go and experiment with gashes and wounds on the battlefront and develop surgery using things like ligature and cauterization. Individuals, again we're looking at some key ones today, but you'll already know quite a bit about Galen and Hippocrates, and obviously the ones we're covering today again on Vesalius, Harvey, Paré, Hunter, and a little bit on Jenner that you've done recently. Government, technology and science are things that kind of come in a bit later on, and then you've got communication with the printing press in the Renaissance, which you understand about, and a little bit about luck, which comes in later on in the course. But these are factors we'll keep coming back to. So just to give you a bit of a quick overview, and again you can pause this if you want to take a look at what's on the board at any point and you want to kind of go through what's on the board. The Renaissance time is obviously all about rebirth. Okay, it's a period in history which is roughly from about 1350 all the way through to about 1700, where actually Columbus is discovering the world. Da Vinci is doing what he does in Italy in terms of his architecture and his arts, all right, and his music. You have also got the Royal Society, all right. Now the Royal Society was founded in England during this time just to try and see science being developed and how that can actually work alongside and used to explain things around astrology. So there's an argument now that's starting to go up around science and religion. You've also got, during this time period, a lot of people returning to the works of Galen and Hippocrates around the four humours and the theory of the opposites and using herbal remedies. So the point that I want to make just around the Renaissance is people are beginning to challenge. They're beginning to challenge the ancient ideas. And there's a reluctance from many in society to go with these new ideas because Galen and Hippocrates have been believed and supported for such a long time. Okay, I just want to talk a little bit first about Vesalius. Now, a lot of you, and feel free to pause it and have a look at what I'll put on here. I'll try to just summarise it. A lot of you will know, as soon as I say the word Andre Vesalius, oh, he is the Flemish dwarf, He's the little guy from Belgium who used to go and dig up graves and look at bodies and work out how bones were structured and the skeleton was structured. Obviously, he was now allowed to perform dissections, but he couldn't look closely at the skeleton. And he was so dedicated to this, as you know, that he kept stealing bodies and playing around with them and trying to use those to teach as he became a professor at a university in Italy called Padua. And what he did was, the one thing I always remember with Vesalius is he's trying to break away from the norm. He's dissecting. He writes his book, The Fabric of the Human Body, in 1543. And it's full of illustrations. There's absolutely loads of pictures in there of his findings around how the body works, and how Galen with the jawbone being one bone, not two. How he disproves Galen with the sternum being 3 parts and not 7. He really begins to try and go against Galen and look at the mistakes that he's made. But these pictures in his books meant that people who couldn't read could actually look at it too, alongside the development of the printing press, okay, and the fact that these books can be printed so many times, he can distribute these ideas. So not only individual, Vesalius, but also communication is a really important factor in proving Galen wrong. So he's the first person that we've done a bit of work on already. The second person that you've had a look at briefly is someone called Ambrose Paré. Now don't worry always about remembering first and second names. The second name is fine, but Paré is actually a barber surgeon. Now if you remember, barber surgeons had 2 kind of main functions. They did cut hair, but also they were surgeons, and the implements like scissors and saws and things that they used to do that, they used to amputate limbs and take blood for bloodletting. So surgery really was not really a high profession at this time, but Paré wanted to get to battles and wanted to go to wars to actually work out how to treat wounds. And the key words you remember about Paré are the crow's beak, where he pulled out the arteries and the veins after cutting off the leg or the arm, and then tying it up into a ligature, and then with hot oil, cauterizing it. So he was one of the first to develop amputations and seal it through burning and cauterizing. Okay, and I've already mentioned the method he invented of cutting off vessels with threads known as ligatures, but it obviously is not stopping infection, because they, at this time, not till later, they don't understand about the germ theory. We have to meet Louis Pasteur in a few years before they understand about that. But gunshot wounds, he loves the gunshot wound, and he treats it boiling, pouring boiling oil all over it. But he does run out of ointments and oils at certain times, and he begins to create his own using turpentine and egg yolk and things. He's quite inventive. But he's very important because, yes, people opposed him, but he was actually the surgeon to the King of France at the time, which shows his significance. So another person to note is Paré. Feel free, guys, to pause it and have a look at any point that you want to. Okay. But the third person we're going to meet is William Harvey. Now, we've seen someone from Belgium, Vesalius. We've seen someone from France, Paré, who were very important people. Now we've got our first Englishman, William Harvey, who obviously works a little bit later on. All right. He did go across to Italy and study medicine at Padua, where Vesalius worked. But actually, he became a lecturer in London, and he became the King's doctor. So Charles II, the third Stuart King, he was the doctor of Charles II. And really, really important. He also realised he could observe living animal hearts, which was a real breakthrough, because what he found out was that actually, if you look at cold-blooded animals, the heartbeat was so slow, so he could work out which direction blood flow, and actually worked out the heart was a pump. Now, this is massively disproving Galen, because Galen didn't think that. Galen believed that the blood was being used up as it went through the body. And actually, what Harvey's doing is he actually disproves that and works out that veins go in and arteries go out, So it's a huge, huge breakthrough. And again, his knowledge of the anatomy was massively, massively different to Galen's, and challenged Galen as well. Galen used to think that the liver was the one that controlled the blood flow. He said, no, it's the heart. He disproved him in quite a few other areas as well. And again, a big breakthrough with his books, because he again used pictures and diagrams to explain his discoveries about blood flowing in one direction and the heart being a pump. So that's 3. And there's a couple more. One other Englishman who we haven't touched on that I thought I'd just share a little bit on is Thomas Sydenham. He was the English Hippocrates, really. He believed in really close observation of the patient, and this was something that obviously Hippocrates started around clinical observation and Galen continued. But he monitors symptoms, and he thinks it's really, really important to see symptoms change over time. And he does support and work on the treatment for smallpox here as well. And I know you know a little bit already about Edward Jenner, who we'll touch on later on. But still, many people are not actually going with these people and accepting what they're saying, because they're reluctant to change. They've believed these ancient guys like Galen and Hippocrates for so long. So they're very reluctant to change. And finally, for this section, we're going to have a little look at a video now, because we've kind of glanced over John Hunter, and I haven't taught you anything about John Hunter. Well, he's a surgeon and what we call an anatomist. He, as you can see in the picture, he loves having a look at anatomy. He loves trying to inside the body and work out how it's functioning. So one thing that is quite important is this idea of Burking, named after a guy called William Burke. They committed 10 murders in a few months in order to sell fresh bodies to surgeons in schools of anatomy, which is really weird. So they're going around killing people and actually then giving the bodies across for people to investigate them at this time. Shows you still how backward we are. But the video you're going to watch will kind of explain it in a bit more detail. So I'm going to put it on now, allow you to watch it and see what you think. So pause the screen if you want to. If not, carry on, and we'll just watch the video. It's about 5 minutes long.
Scientists are often baffled by negative public reaction to a new scientific discovery. They sometimes fail to appreciate that the public genuinely fear that science is dangerous. The way to combat that fear is through effective public engagement. And perhaps surprisingly, one of the best examples of that comes from over 200 years ago, and a scientist who at the time was perceived to be a dangerous villain. In the lobby of the Royal College of Surgeons stands a statue of John Hunter, a Scotsman and one of the fathers of modern medicine. In the 1780s, he started performing surgical operations that were decades ahead of their time. This is the original documentation of the case of John Burley. It's a really excellent example of Hunter's skill as a surgeon. There's a picture of a tumour, so that's what happens when you leave a tumour for too long. It says here, it was increased to the size of a common head, attended with no other inconvenience than its size and weight. And then the second drawing here is after the operation. Completely cured, essentially. But for all his medical brilliance, Hunter was treated with suspicion and even horror. Because to develop his remarkable surgical skills, he had practiced on human corpses. In the 18th century, anatomists were legally entitled to corpses fresh from the gallows, but even so, demand comfortably exceeded supply, and so they had to look to another source of bodies for experimentation. And the easiest place to get hold of fresh corpses was to dig them up from a graveyard. Anatomists were prepared to pay large amounts of money for corpses, and that meant that there were hundreds of grave robbers operating in gangs in London who could dig up to 10 bodies per night, and the best customer of all was John Hunter. On one occasion, he was even arrested for giving a hand to a gang of grave robbers. And these exploits made Hunter incredibly unpopular with the man on the street. Hunter revolutionised surgical techniques for the benefit of everybody, but I suppose not unsurprisingly, his work was controversial in public. So even though he was working in the 18th century, I suppose you could say in the modern vernacular, he had a PR problem. Hunter was so afraid of the adverse public reaction to his work that he was actually in fear of his life. But he reasoned that fear was born of ignorance, and therefore education was the answer. And so he opened this museum to display his work to the public. His collection is still on display today in the Royal College of Surgeons. In these exhibits, people could see how Hunter was using corpses to learn about anatomy and physiology. You could even see his pioneering attempts at opening new fields of medicine. These chicken heads were the recipients of some of the first transplant operations. Although some of these exhibits are gruesome, they show how Hunter was using his knowledge to move medicine out of the Dark Ages. This exhibit marks the beginning of the end of the age of barbaric surgery. What you see here is an aneurysm in the popliteal artery, so that's the artery that goes behind the knee. It's essentially a sac of blood. The artery swells up, and if this goes untreated, then what will happen is that sac will eventually burst, and the patient will bleed to death. Now, the treatment at the time for that was amputation. What Hunter noticed through his work on animal physiology and indeed on the dissection of human specimens was that there are many other arteries in the leg, and he reasoned that if he tied off the affected artery, ligated it, then the blood supply to the aneurysm would be cut off, and he hoped that the other arteries would expand to allow blood to flow down the leg. As well as revolutionising medicine, John Hunter's approach was a model for public engagement. By inviting people into his museum, he was able to address and confront the moral objections to his work.
Okay, so the level of detail there was obviously Brian Cox, Professor of Science and so on, going into a lot of detail, but I just thought I'd break it up and show you that. It's the first time I've done this, so I suppose the next couple of times I'm hopefully going to get a bit better at it and maybe learn from feedback from you. But the main idea for doing it really, guys, is just for you to see me as well, and that I'm still here, and you can obviously ask any questions alongside the video as well through Show My Homework on YouTube. I just want to finish by going through a couple of key things about changing continuity. So you always need to think through medicine about these two kind of things. What is changing and what is staying the same? So continuity is staying the same, things that change in how medicine develops, how surgery develops, how public health changes, and how knowledge of the human body develops alongside science and technology too. One thing that's important, I think, in the Renaissance is printing. And printing links nicely to communication. Now, by developing something called the printing press, it's a huge factor in how new ideas are spread throughout Europe. A massive factor, even to the extent during the Reformation and when Henry VIII breaks away from the Catholic Church, the ideas of Lutheranism, which later becomes Protestantism in England, they are able to be read and understood by a lot of people throughout Europe because of the printing press. It's the same thing with ideas around medicine. So printing press, feel free again to pause and have a look. Printing press is so important. But there were very much so changes in medicine during this time. Now it's interesting because there were changes in understanding, but whether actually the development of what caused the disease or how to treat a disease changed is another question, because Jenner comes in a bit later, Edward Jenner, and begins to vaccinate. But there were changes because Harvey and Vesalius for two proved Galen wrong, just through careful experimentation and dissection. So they prove him wrong. So these ancient ideas that are kind of carried on before Christ and just after Christ and the Roman times are beginning to be challenged. Pare, okay, is great because he's beginning to bandage wounds. He uses ointments. He uses oil as well to cauterize and create ligatures, and also uses quite a lot of the implements that his work at war, okay, in developing how to treat different injuries and stuff is important. But the key factor that I would go back to is communication. Individuals, okay, making a difference, beginning to challenge Galen. But what stays the same? Yes, okay, the discoveries were brilliant, but they did not make our people in England and in the rest of Europe at this time during the Renaissance any healthier at all, okay? Life expectancy is not increasing. Remember that picture on public health that we did in the lesson where we're looking at people actually still drinking from water where waste is put. So there's not that idea and understanding that germs causes disease yet. So they're not really making anyone healthier. But treatments, we still got herbal remedies being used. And surgery improved a little bit because they began to understand how the human body looked better. But they're still using these kind of backward tools, these saws and different types of spleens to bloodlet that are not really, there's no antiseptics, there's no anaesthetics. So all of this surgery is done through a lot of pain and also with the danger of actually spreading infection and not actually treating infection. So people dying of infection. And still some superstitious treatments are used, like charms, like the king's touch and this idea that he had the divine right. But trained doctors and surgeons could still treat those who actually did pay, but the key thing still is that the poor, and the big difference between the rich and the poor is still there because they cannot afford to actually pay for this trained doctory, so they're going to quacks or women or wise women or families that are using these herbal remedies to treat. So, there are some changes, there are some things that stay the same. What I think is going to be a good idea is, okay, just to stop for a minute and have a look at the factors are the ones that I think have really played an important part. Okay, individuals, people begin to challenge. Vesalius and Harvey begin to challenge. Experimenting, Pare challenges. Wars. Public health actually, to an extent, was made worse. Okay, but there's a development of knowledge in anatomy, like Pare through war. Education. More people are able to access it because of the printing press being developed and because of the first universities in Padua in Italy and Cambridge and Oxford in England. People are beginning to access these books and ideas, and literacy is improving amongst society. Bit of technology with the printing press is being developed as well, which links to another factor of communication. What I've put on the board here are two kind of key questions. Compare the work of Vesalius and Hunter. Okay, in what ways are they similar? Explain the significance of William Harvey's work on the development of medicine. Now, they're just two simple questions that if you use your white revision guide or stuff you've got in your yellow book, you could have a go at one of them or both of them, it's up to you. But before we close, I just wanted to touch base on the next stage, and Edward Jenner and smallpox, okay? So, smallpox, obviously, was a disease that killed many in the 18th century. And a lot of you in my year 10 classes have already done work on this. Obviously, there's a guy called Edward Jenner. And the story of Jenner and didn't get this killer disease called smallpox, but they caught a much milder disease called cowpox. Important because he used his skill of experimentation and observation, and he found out it was true. So Jenner is actually creating the first ever vaccination through testing it on this 8-year-old boy called James Phipps, and you'll have read the story. So he becomes another important individual. But there is a lot of opposition to his work, okay, which I'm going to come to in our next video. And I think from what I've learned from doing this, I think I'm going to try and make sure that the next video is maybe a little bit shorter, but actually the graphics on here are a bit clearer. I've done this quite quickly today just because I thought it was going to be a different way of you learning, and hopefully you've actually got a chance to see me. But I'll leave this question on the board if you do want to answer one. If you just sat there and watched the video, absolutely fine, if it works for you. If you sat there and made a couple of notes while listening to me, absolutely fine. I was just trying to vary up your experience of kind of remote learning by doing this. So I'll leave that there. It's a question about medical knowledge during the Renaissance. If you want me to mark anything, please send me it. If you're just happy that you've actually learned quite a bit and you feel more confident because we've got all this stuff you already knew, then brilliant. But what I'll do next week is I'll do another one, but I'll try and do it on one particular thing. I don't want to go too far ahead in the course without actually teaching you and giving the resources in a lesson like I normally would. Okay, thanks. Just leave me any comments if it was useful, brilliant. If it wasn't, absolutely fine. Just use the link for yourself. You don't need to share it with anyone. It's embarrassing enough doing this, so I don't want it to be public knowledge.